fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery with your hosts, Eric Shapiro, David North Martino, John Copenhaver, and Al Warren.
Heard on KCAA 106.5 FM Los Angeles,
102.3 FM Riverside,
and 105.0 AM Palm Springs.
Oh, welcome back into the House of Mystery, and I am Al Warren, of course, and Mr. Dave Martino is on the side.
I'm here.
You're here? I'm
here.
Well, I'm doing okay. I was worried about you a little bit, but
Worried about me?
yeah, you know, after your
What have you heard?
colonoscopy and all that stuff.
Yeah.
You know,
I was a little nervous myself,
well, please.
but it all went well.
Well, of course it did. They don't even need to put you to sleep. Come on. At your age,
The oldest joke in the book, but it never gets too old. You know?
No.
So always worth making that one.
well, and it's true. You know, with him, I mean, my God, he goes into the doctor and just takes off his pants.
Yeah.
And the doctor's like, "Oh, what are you doing?" He's like, "Well, aren't you going to check my, you know?" And it's like, we've already done a colon. Well, I just thought I'd check, you know.
Yeah.
He's crazy.
You don't want to, you want to always make sure. Yeah.
Yeah. The doctor's actually refusing to see him now.
No, yeah. That's true. Won't take my calls.
Yeah. Well, that's all right. We'll find someone new. Well, joining us, the other voice we got is Joseph Osmundson. Now, I hope I said that right.
You did. That
know,
was perfect.
Yeah. Well, I try, but I'm... So, listen, I noticed you on, I believe it was CNN or HLN, one of the two. And not that I watch them a lot, it's just in the morning. And I thought it was really interesting to talk about this. So we thought we'd ask you to come on, and you said, yes, well, I'm pleased, you know. And now your book is called Virology. Sounds like a Madonna song. And essays for the living, the dead, and the small things in between. And of course we're gonna get into some of the things like going on right now, like monkey pox and stuff. But I think the idea behind the book, I love the you know, the food we eat and the people we kiss, you know, all of the different things in our day-to-day life that we interact and do can lead us to all sorts of things, and we don't think about it, like what we're putting into our bodies and all that stuff. So, so let's first, your book, like what made you kind of go this way? Like you're write about the virology and all these sort of things. Like, how did you get into this?
So I am actually a virologist by training. I did my PhD studying viruses, and I also, as a queer man who was born in 1983, with the very year that HIV was found to be the causative agent of AIDS. You know, I've grown up in a way where viruses have impacted my daily. I argue that viruses impact all our daily lives. They are the most abundant life form on Earth. They are not fully living because they can't replicate by themselves, but obviously not fully dead because they can replicate and copy themselves. They're tiny little packages that just contain a recipe for themselves. And, you know, HIV contains only 9 genes and around 10,000 letters in its genome, in its entire genetic packet. 10,000 letters is the recipe for HIV. And yet we have 3.2 billion letters in our cellular recipe, and 22,000 genes and 40 trillion cells. And this tiny virus, HIV, can cause death. And so they are profoundly confusing, perplexing, but important little creatures. And I argue that it's our duty as beings living on this planet. We have more viruses on this planet than there are stars in the sky, to look closely at them. And the more closely you look at viruses, sort of the less they make sense in a way. And I think it's really easy to tell viral stories of HIV or COVID or even now monkeypox and ignore the fact that we have viruses in us every day that we don't feel sick. There are viruses in me that will live until the last day I live. And so just to look at them in a slightly different and more complex way.
So you're kind of saying that there's good purposes behind a lot of the viruses.
I would almost say that there is no good or bad to a virus, even a virus that can cause us harm or illness. They are sort of facts of life. They predated humans on this planet, and after we destroy ourselves, they will remain, So it's more like a conversation with microbes, a conversation with viruses, a living alongside and caring for one another. And sometimes that care will look like HIV medication or a monkeypox vaccine that make it so that we live alongside viruses more in health than in sickness.
Yeah, I think the way the world is lately and the way people are toward, look at after COVID, right? And typical human response was not all that impressive to me. How do we get people on board with thinking about viruses differently?
That is not just a mission of my book, but that's a life's mission. And I don't know that anyone is even going to be able to accomplish it. I think it's so important because the way we look at viruses does harm to ourselves. I think so much, American culture is about looking away from the fact that the only thing true about all human lives is that at some point we will be sick and at some point we will die. That's just life's lot. And, being able to hold nuance and complexity, to be able to hold sickness and health as both facts of human life at the same time. The virus just is one small part of those stories. I talk a lot in my book about cancers, right? The only way to not have risk for cancer is to not be alive. And I have cancerous cells inside of me right now that my immune system are just, taken care of, so it's not like there's ever a no cancer state. It's all we all have subclinical cancers popping up all the time that don't make us sick. And we all have viral infections all the time, that usually don't make us sick.
Well, do we know the difference between, a virus that's destructive or lethal or one that's inert? Is that something that's understood?
It is, all of these things are so complex, right? I wouldn't even say, there's a better understanding with bacteria. Like, a third of people have staph bacteria on their skin or in their nose. And most of the time it doesn't make them sick at all. But for some reason, that same bacterium can become pathogenic. And even that relatively simple decision-making schema, we don't really understand at a molecular level. And similarly with viruses, right? You have even very simple viruses like, a herpes virus that, most people have HSV1, the herpes virus that causes cold sores in them at all times. Once you're infected with it, it stays with you for the rest of your life. And at some points, it will decide to reactivate and give you a cold sore and be very painful. Most of the time, it doesn't. And some of that decision making, it has to do with your immunity. If you are super stressed and your immune system is a little bit low, then it's more likely that the virus will be able to activate. But even, that relatively simple decision, am I going to activate or am I going to remain dormant with the very same virus, herpes simplex virus 1? It's not molecularly understood exactly why that occurs.
Well, I have a friend down the road that told me if I use lavender oil.
Who needs Valdex, right?
Yeah, like I'll never have a problem. It'll fix everything. And silver solution is great for COVID.
Oh, goodness. Oh, goodness.
But that's what I mean. Because nowadays, you see, it seemed like when I was younger, before the internet, which I'm not trying to slam the internet because it does a lot of great things, but there seems to be a lot more of this stuff. I don't want to call it information because it's just stuff floating around and people buy into it. And I don't know how to solve that issue.
it's snakeskin oil sales people or whatever that term is have existed, as long as medicine or fake medicine have existed is not new, but the TV gave Dr. Oz the platform to be Dr. Oz, and the internet has given a lot of other grifters a large platform to make money by selling misinformation. It does make it really complicated for those of us out here, trying to, be not just provide good information, but be honest about how knowledge is made. Science isn't a set of facts, right? Science is a methodology through which one asks questions, attempts to answer them, and then continuously always tries to re-answer them. I talk a lot about the COVID vaccines, right? When we first came out, there was a big debate. Do they prevent severe illness or do they prevent infection? And, COVID vaccines 1.0 actually were remarkably good at preventing infection. That was the best science at the time. But then the virus evolved and you got the Delta strain, and the Delta strain was more immune evasive, and the vaccines went from being very highly effective against infection to less effective, not because science was wrong, but because the virus itself evolved. And science then, its job is to understand the new lay of the land and answer these questions sort of continuously. So it's not anything that's ever done. And I think the more we're transparent about that and curious about the questions to ask and bring people into the process of how scientists ask and answer questions continuously, the better off we'll be.
Yeah. I don't have much faith for the human race, so I'm voting for the viruses.
They will win. They will win when we're gone. The viruses will be here. The sad thing is we're going to take the human viruses with us, right? No more herpes on planet Earth. Sorry. No more HSV1.
Yeah. Well, they're going to sit around and have a beer and talk about those humans. My God, it'll be kind of a fun talk for them. So now we've got monkeypox out. And
yep.
I'm starting to hear all sorts of things. Now, of course, again, it's turning into kind of like the COVID thing where there's all sorts of stories flying around and it's just starting. So what is it that we need to be thinking about or doing as far as monkeypox is concerned?
Oh man, it's just been such an exhausting and horrible few months. And, I was saying before we started recording that, this isn't theoretical to me. This is personal to me. Two of my very closest friends in the world have had this virus. Both of them had to isolate for extended periods of time. One of them was in just the most immense physical pain of his life. It's an emotionally exhausting experience. This is happening to my community, and I feel like I am at risk as well. The virus is spreading mostly through sex, and it's mostly spreading through sexual networks of gay men, which of course include trans and non-binary people, and even, cis women, because bisexual men do exist. So, this is the lay of the land right now, and we are in a really bad situation, not because gay sex exists. Gay sex always exists and always will, but because our government really failed to get ahead of this crisis with the tools that we fortunately do have: testing, treatment, and vaccination, right? We could probably have stopped this virus from spreading if the U.S. moved vaccine into arms in May and June and was serious about scaling testing so we could actually contact trace. And instead of that happening, now we're in a situation where more than 12,000 people have been diagnosed with this illness. And it's just been, a collective trauma, I would say, for gay social and sexual networks that, is eerily reminiscent, not of HIV, not because the viruses are similar, but just because we've been screaming and crying about people in our community being sick and being unable to get care. And there has just been no urgency in providing those tools that we need.
Yeah, it reminds me of HIV in the sense of, and I even heard, of course, Taylor Greene, because that video is
Right.
going around where she's just kind of going, well, it's just happening from sex with one type of people type thing. So it's nothing we need to be concerned about. She's kind
Yeah.
of basically, and it's kind of like, well, you could say that about anything, but it does, we're humans and we contact and it doesn't take long. Look at HIV. I mean, it will get out because you're right. There's a lot of bisexual men and there's a lot of other things going that we
Yep.
won't even talk about, but it will spread into the mainstream community if it's not taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, infectious diseases teach us that we're connected to one another, and we already have cases outside of the gay community. And this is a virus that when you're having sex, you have a lot of skin to skin contact, and there may be introduction of the virus into places like the rectum or the mouth where it is easier to catch. That's all still ongoing science. But this virus is also spread by towels and sheets and hugs and skin to skin contact. So, we already have plenty of cases outside of gay sexual networks to show us that, if anyone's at risk, we're all at risk.
So do you think that's the reason the government, let's say in this case, was slow to respond?
I think we have to be honest that since Reagan, probably there's been a immense divestment from public health infrastructure at the city, state, and federal level. So we are just less well prepared than we once were. My friend Mark Harrington keeps telling the story about 1947 in New York. There were 12 cases of smallpox. And within 6 weeks, in 1947, something like 5 million vaccines were given across New York City alone, right? We were once able to mobilize this type of a response because we had the vaccine on hand and there was urgency about stopping the infectious disease. We found that urgency to be lacking, particularly in the U.S. federal government, where it just sort of was another day at the office for most people, it seemed like. And, we were out here saying our community is suffering. It didn't seem to land, that we needed help. And, only the federal government has access to vaccines and treatments and tests. Like they are the only ones that can do this. I don't know if it was ineptitude or homophobia. I don't know what it was, but I know what happened. And what happened is that people didn't get testing or vaccine or treatment.
So, now monkeypox, what do we know about it? I guess it's something we had a vaccine for already, and it's something that's been around a long time. And
It is.
the story I heard was it came from a prairie dog.
Oh, that's a great anecdote. In 2003, there was an outbreak in the U.S. That came from imported pets, like prairie dogs. That's right. This is a virus that was discovered in humans in 1970. It's endemic, which means it's there are animals that carry it, and it spreads over into humans from time to time in regions of Central and Western Africa, from Congo to Nigeria. The smallpox vaccine actually is effective against monkeypox. Okay. So when we say we have monkeypox vaccines, that's because the virus is closely related to smallpox, which we eradicated from planet Earth in 1980. What happened basically was when we stopped vaccinating in 1980 for smallpox because it was eradicated, in the regions where monkeypox was more common, we didn't keep vaccinating with the smallpox vaccine, even though that would have prevented monkeypox. So from 1980 to around 2010, monkeypox cases explode. And then from 2017 until today, there's been ongoing continuous human-to-human spread of this virus in urban centers in Nigeria. So, it's just sort of a matter of time at that point before it starts spreading outside of that region. And when it does, the real fear is that it will become endemic everywhere around the world. So it really was our failure to prevent this infectious disease when it was in Central and West Africa that has led to this global crisis. I've been calling it a global crisis that we chose.
Well, I know we have like very low vaccine supplies in Massachusetts, and I'm sure in other states and in other areas. And I'm just wondering, what type of precautions should we be taking without having the vaccine readily available?
Yeah, we are really pushing the federal government to ramp up vaccine production. It's not even production. They have 15 million doses sitting in bags. They just need to put in vials, and that needs to happen ASAP. Until people have access to 2 doses of vaccine, we are giving people information about what the riskiest type of sex is. If you are communicating with your partners about if you feel sick and you know your partners and you're more comfortable communicating with them, that's one really great way to mitigate risk. It's very hard to do that in places like bathhouses and saunas. We know that 30% or so of cases have come from people meeting in places for sex, and where it's harder to have these types of conversations. So, this is not coming from a place of trying to shame people for going to bathhouses. I love bathhouses. This is like a space of trying to keep this community that we care so dearly about from getting a really painful virus.
Yeah, I think it's more of it's controversial to say, but I think the evangelical hold on the right wing and the right party, it's very they want to punish anybody for gay sex or any of that stuff. So right. I think it's a big negative. So it doesn't really it's hard to get over that hump with.
But we've been even seeing in this intra community sort of argument within gay people about if we should be finger wagging about group sex or bathhouses or promiscuous interactions on an app like Grindr. This is a tale as old as time, right? This goes back to HIV and before. There are people who are inherently, more conservative and more monogamously minded, and that's great for them. But it definitely, there's a discomfort with these other types of sexual practices that also are a tale as old as time, going back to the Greeks, right? Saunas and bathhouses and places where, men or queer people congregate, and are physical with one another. And, we need to view that as, a thing that is healthy, that people enjoy, that gives them pleasure. And infectious disease physicians and biomedicine should be about preventing infectious diseases while people are able to do the type of sexual acts that they find pleasurable.
Yeah. So so in essence, the people like at my age group anyway, have had the smallpox vaccine.
Yeah.
And now again, I hear things like it's 85% effective and all this stuff like that. But is this the case? Do you think that someone like myself should get the monkeypox vaccine?
Yeah. So we know that cases can transmit to folks who had smallpox vaccine decades ago. It may provide a small amount of protection that is more or less unknown, but if you are in the eligibility by the CDC, if you're the type of person who has a few partners a week, or enjoys bathhouses and saunas, as I know some of our elders certainly do, you should absolutely get the vaccine.
Yeah, there you go, Dave. No, so now what is the monkeypox vaccine? Now, is it 2 shots or 1?
It is. So there are 2. The one being used right now is a vaccine called Jynneos. It's a 3rd generation vaccine, very safe. It is a 2-dose regimen. And there's some controversy going on right now. The federal government is doing this dose sparing strategy. So it's going to give the shot in a way that most shots are not given. We think, which is called intradermally. So it's sort of between layers of the skin, like a TB test. But regardless of if you get it in the sort of back of the arm subcutaneously, as many folks have until now, or if you get it intradermally, which I think most people following now will get, it is a 2-dose vaccine for full protection. Yep.
Wow. Okay. And of course, anybody younger should be doing this, right? Like if you were born after they stopped giving these smallpox, you would just get it, right?
Yeah. So the idea is, if you are in the eligibility, it's time to get out there and get the vaccine. And we have to understand that the efficacy of this vaccine in the context of this outbreak is not well understood. We believe the vaccine will be highly effective. We have seen a couple of breakthrough cases, although it's unclear if if those people had gotten 2 full doses of the vaccine. It may not be a silver bullet, but we need to insist that studies show the vaccine efficacy in the context of monkeypox spreading as it's spreading right now around the world.
Now, what about non-sexual physical contact? And the reason I ask that is I've been a martial artist for most of my life, and I go to seminars and classes and stuff like that. And there are certainly like Brazilian jiu-jitsu practitioners who roll and all that stuff. Are martial artists and other athletes at risk as well, or how much?
We are thinking about wrestling and football and martial arts, certainly. We don't see the virus spreading epidemiologically there right now, but anyone who has a high amount of physical touch in their lives, from, people who work in massage to dancers to, even clothing can spread the virus, right? So if you are, in a high school drama club or in a marching band and you're the marching band uniform manager, anything that's high touch would carry risk for this virus. The question is the virus then getting into that touch network? And right now we don't see that very much. There are limited cases. There's a case that came epidemiologically linked just this week to, we think, a sort of outdoor music festival with kind of, a crowded space and lots of physical touch. So, there are different levels of risk. Right now, martial arts, outdoor festivals are not no risk, but are certainly very low risk. But that anyone who has a lot of touch in their lives should have this on their radar. And if they see a rash or have a flu-like illness followed with a rash, they should definitely go to their doctor. And if it's not on their doctor's radar, they should put it on their doctor's radar. And in the US right now, commercial labs can test. So your doctor can take a swab of your lesion, be it a zit or be it a monkeypox lesion, and send it out for testing really easily.
Okay. How long does it take before you find out then?
Testing turnaround has been up and down. We're hearing from commercial labs 3 to 4 days.
Wow. And how long does this thing normally last? Like, so if I was to get monkeypox, right? So all of a sudden I'm feeling bad and I'm starting to get lesions and lumps. So at that moment then, how long does it usually stay keep me ill? How's that?
Yeah, it's really a rough virus in terms of the duration of illness. It can be anywhere from 10 days, 2 weeks, all the way up to 4, 5, and 6 weeks. And the CDC guidance is to completely isolate until all of your lumps and bumps and lesions have fallen off and are replaced with a new layer of skin underneath. So part of the difficulty of this virus is that it is just really, really emotionally exhausting and painful to have to isolate for this long, even when it's not a super painful course of illness. I think maybe 50% of the people who I know who have had monkeypox, it wasn't super duper painful, but it's still emotionally and financially and practically very difficult just because you have to stay home for weeks on end.
Wow. So it's significant. Like, you really do. That's a big chunk of your life if you're sitting in there for weeks and stuff.
Yeah, I think, COVID gave people the notion that 5 or 10 days isolation can be very, very painful. And so I think that gives people a better perspective on what it means to ask someone to isolate for 5 weeks.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, of course, people that know me want me to isolate for weeks. But that's
and take away your phone so you can't text them. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly. That's a different story. It's nothing to do with any monkeypox and stuff like that. Why do they call it monkeypox then?
So it's a bad name. It is a bad name. It was actually first discovered in laboratory monkeys in Sweden in 1958. And so because that was the first animal that it was found in, they named it monkeypox. But we've since learned that monkeys are not its natural reservoir. Those monkeys had been infected because they were laboratory animals being shipped across the ocean and were probably kept with some rodent along the way. Not probably, were definitely kept with some rodent along the way at some point. So it's sort of a misnomer, and it's really unfortunate because I've even seen websites like Johns Hopkins or journalists say, its natural reservoir is monkeys, and It just isn't, and it also sort of evokes, a heart of darkness imagery of the African continent in ways that, are again, a misnomer. It's not found in monkeys. I was shouted at monkeypox on the street, right? It's not a nice name to have associated with an illness. So those of us in the community are starting to call it MPV or MPX, especially in writing, to kind of try to rename it. And the WHO is currently enlisting a panel. This bureaucracy, right? So this will happen in 5 years' time. But, there was a letter signed by, dozens of African scientists and doctors. The queer community is really pushing that this name is actually like a double harm. It's like, it's quite bad enough to be this type of sick for this long. And the name really adds stigma and harm to those who are already suffering.
Yeah, the whole thing. Do you think this is just the beginning? But I'm hearing a lot of that because after the COVID thing, and now we've got this, and people are starting to say, "Oh, it's just the beginning. Every year we're going to be having these and that." What do you think?
I think this monkeypox it's so unfortunate because it's such a gnarly illness, but it's likely to stick around, we think, at this point. It's not impossible that we contain it or do a better job. But it's likely to be a global virus now. And that again was really a choice about who we cared for in the decades from 1970 to now. And I think that's a lesson that if we continue to allow, folks anywhere on the globe to, become ill for decades with a preventable infectious disease, ultimately these things will keep happening. The planet is warming. People are living more and more, in environments where they're in interaction with animals. And this is everywhere. This is, SARS-CoV-2 on the Asian continent, hantavirus in the desert Southwest, swine flu in North America, and, MPV in Congo and Nigeria. So these are global issues, and it is an emergency. This is part of global warming. This is part of people increasingly traveling more and more. We're an interconnected, warming planet. And so we do fear that unless we reimagine public health as for the global public, we will keep seeing more and more viruses emerge and do harm.
So in essence, we should have really been, going to the countries that had the issue and been vaccinating people.
Well, the U.S. let 20 million doses of this Jynneos vaccine expire in a freezer, as opposed to using it in people who needed it in Nigeria, Congo, Ghana, and other places in West and Central Africa.
Yeah, you see, but that's the whole thing. See, to me, when I look at that, I think of whoever's in the control seat, president and Congress and stuff. No matter what, as long as they keep allowing that kind of attitude or behavior where we would rather let them expire than, let's say, send them to countries that need them, we're going to keep on having these outbreaks.
That's exactly right. And it's just, it's a choice. It's an active choice. And it just shows the disregard for, lives in other countries. Those vaccines were not needed in the U.S., and to just let them expire and to imagine that wouldn't be it. And not only to let them expire, to not replace them, right? Because if we had replaced them and there were 20 million vials of vaccine sitting there ready to go, not just to America, but around the globe in response to this crisis, in all likelihood, we would have been able to contain the global spread.
Yeah. So, because at the end of the day, it's also our own spoiled nature of it's not going to bother us. It's over there, right?
That's right.
And so we think it won't hurt us. It's really depressing. Thank you.
I'm always fun to bring to the party. We'll get a few more butt jokes in to even it out.
Yeah. Come on, Dave.
Yeah, especially at my expense. It's perfect.
Yeah. Come on, get out there and start showing it. So the positive thing is that we do kind of know what the virus is and how to sort of contain it. Like we do, the vaccine will So if I get the vaccine, it's going to stop me from getting sick, right? That's kind of
We hope so. We think so, and we hope so. With what efficacy, 85, 70, or 100, those are open questions. But the immunity in response to vaccination is clearly strong.
Okay, so that's one big thing I noticed. Okay, so even over COVID, and now we've got monkey MPV, we'll call it, or with these viruses and with vaccines, what is a vaccine supposed to do? Like, why do we get vaccines?
Vaccines basically give your immune system a taste of what a pathogen looks like, so that when you meet the real thing, you don't have to wait for your immune system to learn about it to kick its ass, right? So the vaccine is sort of like, it's an amuse-bouche, if you will, so that the infection never arrives. And the crazy thing about, vaccines have been around for hundreds of years, right? We were inoculating cowpox into people to protect against smallpox. And that's essentially using a weaker version of smallpox so that when you get actual smallpox, your body sees it. It doesn't even get to make an infection because your immune system goes like, hey, I know you, get the fuck out of here. But the tricky thing is that some viruses are really easy to vaccinate against, and smallpox is one of them. And other viruses have thus far remained impossible, such as HIV. And then you have everything in between where you have flu vaccine that, the flu evolves so quickly that you need to get a new one each year to teach your immune system, hey, this is the flu that's likely to be coming this year. And even then it's maybe 70% effective, right? So, viruses are tricksters, and that each different virus acts in a very different way. And therefore, different drugs and different vaccines will have different levels of efficacy against different viruses. And you really have to learn about each virus separately and figure out how to either teach your immune system about it before you get it by vaccination, or develop drugs like the HIV drugs that prevent the infection once you've already have it.
Yeah, because with the COVID, there was this huge, and even I see a lot of different people in the media just sort of going on about how they thought that, once I got vaccinated, I couldn't get it,
Yeah, vaccines are an essential tool, and a vaccine with what we call sterilizing immunity, and what that basically means is everyone who gets the vaccine will never get not even an infection with the virus or pathogen. Those are sort of the beautiful exception to the rule, and you have everything in between. And then I sort of think about it as a triangle. So the pathogen, the virus, is one part of the triangle. My body and my cells is another part of the triangle, and biomedicine, so vaccines or drugs, is a third part of the triangle. And it's those three things together that say whether or not I get sick and how sick am I going to get. And the virus can change. One big question about this monkeypox crisis is this virus actually molecularly different? Is it a new strain of the virus that is spreading in different ways? Or has the virus just, found the networks through which it will more easily spread? And those are really open questions. Studying viral evolution is actually something that I'm super interested in my academic life. But it takes time to determine what is actually going on the level of the virus. And, so using things like immunization to give our body protection is really an essential part, but not the only part of the determination of whether or not anyone's going to get sick.
So, yeah, and if I understand it right, see, the more the virus spreads amongst humans, the more cases we get, it's more likely to evolve and move on. Like the virus will change because that's correct, right?
So it is, some of my friends and I have talked about the level of replication that's happening right now with monkeypox. There are more monkeypox cases around planet Earth right now than there ever have been in history, right? So will this open up enough space for this? And again, this virus hasn't been spreading human to human in the human species for that long. So will, this amount of replication, every time the virus copies itself, it gets an opportunity to also evolve. It's unclear whether there will be enough sort of evolutionary space for this virus to find new strains or to become better adapted to humans. And, our job really is to make sure that it doesn't get the opportunity, right, to use all of our tools that we have in our toolkit to say, hey, virus, please don't replicate as much as possible all across the world. And that is, to everyone's benefit, because we will theoretically and hopefully be preventing evolution as well.
Yeah, because it's in my thinking, I guess what we should be doing is trying to tackle all of these different things like the monkeypox and stuff right from the get-go, because
That's
we
right.
want to stop it because we really don't know. Like there's no solid answer. There's just kind of the behaviors of viruses, and the best we can do is track them and see what they do and then learn from that.
That's right. That's exactly right. And it's both selfish, and the moral and ethical right thing to do is to provide the best biomedical care for every human on this planet. And it's obviously the ethical thing to do, because every life is worth protecting, whether it be in Kinshasa, or Lagos, Nigeria, or in Washington, D.C. But it is also, if you want to take a step back, our national security has been compromised by our refusal to care for and prevent this virus halfway around the world.
Well, there's a few in Washington that
I am not wishing a pox on anyone in Washington, but part of me trying to walk through.
Well, do you think it's just incompetence that they let this the vaccine to expire, or is it just not caring and not understanding, or is it just cheaper? Was it just cheaper to let it expire? Is that why that happened?
I mean, it definitely is. Funding is an issue for these things, right? And this vaccine was developed and stockpiled not for monkeypox, but actually out of fear of a smallpox bioterrorism attack. So a part of the struggle to respond to this outbreak is that the federal government should have had this on their radar, certainly, but this was not the front of their mind. The front of their mind was how to use this to stop a smallpox attack. And so that led them to make a whole bunch of decisions about what the stockpile looked like, how things would be stored, when they would be made, and when they would go actually out. How much of the stockpile can you activate at a sort of fingers touch, at a snap of the fingers? These are difficult strategic questions. No one is saying that, this is like easy theoretical stuff, because if you move the vaccine out of its storage place, you sort of, that vaccine has shot its load, as it were, right? You kind of can't put it back in storage. And so if you move hundreds of thousands of doses of vaccine and you end up only having 2,000 cases or using 2,000 doses, that's an investment that has been lost. The frustrating thing is, we have people in our federal government whose one job is this. It is their one job, to respond to these types of situations. And yet, the queer community was on the front lines. We saw that cases were not getting detected because there wasn't enough testing. And we were begging for these people whose one job it is to get ahead of these things, for them to do the right thing. And not only did they, sort of ignore us and then completely not move enough vaccine to respond and not scale up testing. And so it's like, what do you do here? Like, what is it, what would you say you do here? This was your one freaking job, to respond with urgency to an emergency. It's like literally called emergency pandemic preparedness. So it's been a bit perplexing to those of us in the community who have borne, the biggest burden of disease that, my friend who just got out of isolation, I got to hug him for the first time this weekend, tried very hard to get vaccine in June and was unable to do so.
Yeah, it's kind of, it's strange, so now, how do people get vaccinated now, or can they?
It is tough still. Cities are getting allocations. It depends heavily on what city and state you're in. Some places like Ohio and Arizona have been really, really underserved in terms of the vaccine doses that they've gotten, because until now, vaccine doses have been doled out by where known cases are. And so if there's not a lot of testing in your area, you haven't been getting a lot of vaccine. the federal government is trying to work on that, then again, that takes vaccine out of the arms of New Yorkers who have the most demonstrated need because we have the highest number of cases. We are still in a vaccine scarce situation, and we think we will be probably until next year. So, folks have got to pay attention to the cities and states they live in, to what's happening there, your local departments of health. Call up your local city government or your state government and see what's going on. Most places have both an online portal for vaccination and a phone number you can call in. You can ask your primary care physician about it. You can go and talk to your sexual health clinics in your city or state. But it is still, I will acknowledge, it's just too difficult still.
Wow. How long does it take them to create a vaccine? Not create, that's the wrong word, because they've already got this vaccine. Yep. But how long does it take them to make it so that they can,
we actually have 15 million doses sitting in bags that have to be what's called filled and finished, which just means put from a bag into a vial and labeled and quality tested. And that process, we have been trying to say this needs to get done in the next month to 2 months. And the federal government's timeline right now for that fill and finish is not until January. So that is a bummer. I think it's obviously the case that there's going to be a continued global need for vaccine substance from this small company, Bavarian Nordic in Denmark. Manufacturing vaccine takes time and expertise. It is not the easiest thing in the world. It's not like making a drug where you can make a gajillion pills for relatively cheap, relatively quickly. But this is why we need to keep pressure on our government to continue invest. And, the federal government will make a lot of excuses, but they can move money places it needs to go quickly. And the COVID vaccine drive taught us that, right? That vaccine went from no mRNA vaccine ever being put into patients outside of a clinical trial to shots going into arms with the research and development and scale up of production in just months. So where there is a political will, there is a practical way. And that is what we are insisting on here.
Yeah. Well, Bill Gates had to get his computer chip in everyone.
This and every other vaccine is computer chip free.
Oh, I want to get a chip from Bill. That's no fun. Well,
I just take 1 million. I'll take one of Bill. He has too many millions of dollars. I will take just ones of his millions.
Yeah. Unbelievable. Okay, let's talk about where people can get your book. So let's talk. Do you have a website and you do a podcast or something too? So let's give all that out.
Yeah. So the website is josephosmundson.com. If you just Google Joseph Osmondson, it comes right up. The book is called Virology. And, the virology is a type of it's a field of study. It's a title of textbooks. And so the book, it does this thing where it both contains science in it, but it also contains stories from my life and some talking about other books and some queer theory. And it kind of has a mishmash of different things, which, by the way, there's a lot of 1-star reviews on Amazon being like, I thought I was buying a textbook and then page 2 has a blowjob on it. Which is like, I want to get that like tattooed on my forehead. That's like exactly the point of the book. So you can find that wherever books are sold. The podcast is Food for Thought, the number 4 and thought spelled THOT. It's with my lovely friends, Tommy Pico, Den Michelle Norris, and Fran Tirado. And yeah, I'm being annoying on Twitter at Reluctantly Joe pretty much all the time.
Oh, great. Now we'll have all that up on our site too, so people can find you with one click, easy. And remember, people, if you type in Joseph's name on Google, he'll come. Right.
I will. I will. I can feel it happening even now.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, I have to say, the thing that first thing I noticed when I went to your site and it said it says your name and then it's got what is it? It's like scientist, author, and then fag. I thought, geez, that's something I would say.
Just to bring it back to this moment, the gays have this incredible ability to be both deeply serious and deeply frivolous in the same conversation. And we, talk about sex, frankly, with our girlfriends. And because these infectious diseases from HIV to monkeypox spread through sex. That's how they travel from one person to another. We really need people with our voices, with our full, from community for community, to get information out there, both about how to prevent this virus with vaccines and also how to use risk management to try to not get it while we wait for vaccines to come online.
Yeah, I think it's important. So that's actually, why I asked you to be on, because I truly think it's important, and just for everybody to get on board. There's a lot of people uncomfortable talking about sex, and when it comes up, they don't want to listen, but there's reasons we need to talk about it. So, it's important. So I really appreciate you coming on the show. I appreciate you talking about all this and also everything you do. I mean, you don't have to do all this, and you don't have to get out there and try to make things work, because I know what it's like dealing with media and public and trying to get people on board. It's not always easy. So I really appreciate all your work as well. So,
thank you so much, Alan, and Dave too.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the House of Mystery radio show. To find out more about our guests, hosts, or shows, go to www.houseofmystery.com.
Show's over for now.
Was it as good for you as it was for me?
Well, good night.
This has been a production of Something Weird Media.
I'll be back.